Afternoon, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Tuesday, March 17th, 2026 at 2:10 in the afternoon. So we're back from the floor, back from lunch, back from caucuses. And we will have, I think, just a committee discussion on CTE, where we're at right now. We've seen a couple of proposals or some draft language. Just trying to get a read from the committee of where they are, where you all are. Um, and just have some open dialogue, I think, as we move forward. I think S313 will be coming here sometime as our vehicle. Um, we should keep working to keep figuring out where we want to go so that we can hone in on that. I think, we looked at the language that prepared based on AOE, what AOE brought to us. Which is, new governance structure. I think there's a lot of that. There's still some outstanding questions that we had when we met last week, and I think Ruth was taking those to AOE. I haven't heard back yet of Jonathan at the bad site question. We haven't heard anything yet. We also have some language that we asked Beth to prepare based on what Back had brought to us. So, rulemaking, and a few minor changes in the statute. So I'm just wondering where people are. What are they thinking? I mean, what are you thinking about? The ESSA model that AOE has brought to us, and I guess let's start there.
I can start. I can start talking. So the ESSA model, I don't have their presentation in front of me, but I liked the way it was sort of laid out about what we want, the sort of vision of what we want, which is essentially the way I think of it is a regional high school that is comprehensive, that includes CTE pathways, that includes regular education pathways, that includes the ability for students to do both, to do both.
Yeah, you're kind of flowing in
Yeah.
between seamlessly.
Exactly. And the vision I can very excited by the way they've listed off the variety of pieces of that vision. But I struggle with how the ESSA, if that's our vision and it's a long-term vision, right? Like maybe there's certain high schools that can do it earlier, but let's say it's a 20-year vision. I struggle with how the ESSA model gets us, like the ESSA model seems conflicting in a regional comprehensive high school that allows, like, I don't get that. So that's my struggle with the ESSA model, is that if we start with what we want as a vision and then reverse engineer a governance model that would fit that and would get us there, I don't think anybody, and when I asked my question, they really couldn't answer that as well. They didn't really have an answer about how it would fit with that vision. So that's my concern.
Next in line. I share what Abby's saying. The agency's draft, I thought had said a lot of good things, but I didn't see how it would help get to where we want to go. And where we want to go is, much better access to CTE for our students. And ultimately, I'm thinking about the roadmap kind of thing. And, what ultimately I think we would love to see would be, or at least I would love to see, would be a regional comprehensive high school that integrates CTE into its program. So how do you get there? There are a bunch of pieces I think we could tackle, kind of short or medium term. And maybe we can get a lot of commonality around that. I don't see the concept of a statewide governance structure as compatible with our goal, because it seems to me to perpetuate a bunch of the segregation that's occurring now. I just don't understand how a lot of this would work. I don't understand how, the funding, the providing programming, aligning a lot of these issues that people have talked to us about. I don't know, I don't see how that is supported or helped by having two separate governing structures. So what that governance structure is supposed to be, that's a good question. But I think ultimately, I sort of have in my mind this idea of a comprehensive regional high school that integrates CTE and to form a governance structure that's compatible with that ultimate goal. Then we could build in a bunch of the short-term pieces that I think we need to do around calendars, around tuition, around transportation between districts that have a lot of capacity and those that don't. But I think unless you have sort of a vision of where you want to end up, it's going to be tough to get those pieces in the right place.
Yeah, to build on what's already been said and to go off of the question I asked when they were here. Yeah, I mean, yes, I think the long-term vision is laudable. I'm not sure that they've been really clear on how this would get us there. And that's why I asked the question. I mean, so as this process moves forward, and if they created the visa, how do the duties that and jobs that are currently being done, how do those get distributed, down to the district level or visa level or up? What jobs get eliminated? What because of redundancy? What new jobs are there that they haven't really clearly identified that are going to meet some of these needs that they're talking about that they want to do? It did not seem clear to me that they actually had a real strategic map on how to get from here to there, and so some of the things that they were throwing out and suggesting that the ESA would be doing were things that I found myself saying, well, should the Agency of Education be already doing that? And so why are we creating another body that's just going to complicate things, especially when that does not seem to fit in with whatever the goals of Act 73 were. So I like the idea. I just am not sure that I trust that the plan and process has been effectively articulated.
Hello. I agree with everything that has been said so far. It's very nice to hear the goal articulated that hands-on, like the goal is for comprehensive hands-on learning to exist throughout the system, either through a CTE program or through these early intervention, early touch programs in the rest of the system. And so I guess with the conversation about even engaging with, middle school or even elementary school, I am left with that same question, like how exactly is the ESA going to fit in with the rest of K-12? And it seems like one side or the other has been melded into the other to make this thing work. I keep coming back to the structures that we once had in our systems with various types of electives and hands-on learning. I'm wondering if there's a way to bridge the gap between what we have now in this larger 20-year structure that we're thinking about. So how are we going to, in the interim, roll out some of these programs and get the alignment and continuity with the CTE programs that we already have? It seems like there is some desire among the CTE schools to, they didn't throw the ESA idea out the window entirely. So I do take that for something. But it would be nice to hear from the agency, how we're imagining the governance side of both of these systems to play nice together.
So I recognize the goal of having comprehensive high schools. I think that's great. But I also share concerns, is this the right way to get there? I'm building off of Emily because I have fond memories of being in sixth, seventh, eighth grade. And we had this class where it was broken down into three things. And I did woodworking and metal shop and bike repair. And then it went up to electricity and auto mechanics. And it really helped spark that interest. You know, I still have in my office the 3-tier shelf that I built in seventh grade. So that's really, really important to me that we have this, the people that children are exposed to the stuff as soon as possible. And I also think important is the high school experience. You know, my own wife was torn out of her school. She went to Colchester grades K through 11 and then was taken out for 12th grade. She spent her last year. She wasn't able to graduate with any of her friends. And I mean, it was, you know, I mean, she's okay, but it was something she really had to deal with. She really had to work through that. And I would not want to wish that on anyone. But I find myself, the ESA looks great in concept, but of course the devil's in the details. And I find myself saying, okay, well, let's say for the sake of argument, we say, you know, the CSA thing doesn't work. Well, then what?
Yeah.
Do we have a better idea?
Yeah.
And if we don't, then we either go with the ESA, or if we don't have a better idea, we kick it down the road. And what if we don't have a better idea next year? Do we kick it down the road again? So I feel like we need to do something. We need to take some sort of action. What that is, I don't know.
I don't know. But one thing that, so in my portion of the state, I think we have a pretty good example of what people are trying to move towards, where the high school and the Career Technical Education Center are on the same campus. They share some walls, you know, there's a little bit of you can walk from one end to the other without going outside, and that's valuable. I was distressed in, I guess, the draft of the bill. Another important component of where I live has to do with students who are resident in the Wyndham Southwest Supervisors Union enrolled at public expense in the Charles H. McKay Technical School or the Franklin County Technical School. This is something that's getting cut out. I didn't see where something to smooth people's concerns is elsewhere because that's all in Massachusetts. The point is that's the closest career technical education center to them that is in Vermont is more than, I think, twice as far. So it's an important, how we address that, I'll be very interested to see because that matters. But anyhow, I think the ESA, and talking to people at the in the technical center in Southwest Tech, doesn't seem so, it seems relevant. It seems to make sense. I was glad to hear that in conversation. And I guess a lot rides then on how we feel good about the 5 members, I think. That would be sort of that governing body of the ESA. That seems like an important collection of not even a half dozen people talking about just sort of working with that assistant or the executive director. So I would like to feel like that, like feel a lot of confidence in how that quintet is assembled, because I think that would mean a lot to people in terms of how it's able to hear the different parts around the state, the different voices around the state.
So for the funding model with the ESA, I feel like it takes away that confliction there when you have it separated. I'm not opposed to the statewide process of that. I think that the benefit of that is if you know, STEM trades are not offered in Burlington, but they are offered in Barry. We can ship that kid right down to Barry. You have to have the comprehensive side of things, right? Because can't do half days in those situations. Those kids have to be there all day. And that, my personal opinion would be to combine our high schools and our CTE centers all together
Right.
and just put it all under our jurisdiction, but, that's probably a little much, but, I, you know, I think of, you know, we don't, I'm in insurance, right? But they're in education, they're the agency of education, so I have to think that they've done all the research on this and it's kind of where I'm sitting on that for the professionals in the room, so.
Really, the Agency of Education made a good argument for just having one statewide school district.
I would say this.
Well, I think that a statewide approach help alleviate some of the things that we've heard, such as at North Country. By the director, that some of the students from sending schools were told mid-year that the academic pieces that they were getting at the CTE weren't gonna count toward graduation. That needs to be standardized and stabilized. I like the idea of making it easier for the trade instructors to come in from the trades to teach, and whether that's changes in licensure, certification, whatever that takes, have some oversight to that and some cohesive process for that would work across the board. And maybe that does need to include a funding mechanism so that the smaller ones aren't at an economic disadvantage with the larger ones. That being said, well, a question I have, I know, Mike, you asked at least twice for timelines for ESA rollout. And of course, we have no timeline because we don't even have a target in place yet for education reform overall. Everybody talks that, oh yeah, we're looking at centralized schools, you know, what's the term for the regional?
Gets out.
Yeah, you know, the whole shebang. Hopefully spread around the state to kind of balance capacity issues, but keeping that flexibility so that if, you know, 2 years down the road, all of a sudden the auto mechanics is full here, they can still ship, you know, kids somewhere else. So to me, we are still hitting a moving target. So do we really want to try and set up anything rigid right now as an interim step? Some of these things do need to be addressed and do need to be addressed at the state level, as I opened my remarks with. But I don't know that we really need another hardware store silo sitting up in the back lot. You know, let's keep it flexible.
I'd continue off Dave's. I feel like listening to all the stuff, everybody, I have nothing new to add to what everybody has said, except for it from being somebody who's not steeped in education and is trying to keep up, like this proposal seemed to come really late in the game to like, I think everybody agrees and have heard that like reform is needed, but like this mechanism came pretty late in the game to be a very big disruption. And so, yeah, I guess I generally agree with everybody's comments and just feel like something this big, we definitely shouldn't be rushing, like Dave said.
Can I add something? Tony said something that struck me. Well, if we're not going to do this, what are we going to do, right? And, you know, the problem is, I think every region of the state is in a bit different situation. So it's really hard to say, okay, this is what's going to work for everybody. I'll share with you though, talking in my neck of the woods, what makes sense for them, whether it makes sense in some other area, I really don't. They are, I believe, in Addison County, they're willing to think about a comprehensive regional high school. Whether they're in more than one facility, in square one, that's maybe another definition, but having that concept and the governance of that integrated high school be a single entity, right? At a county level. At the same time, people are not comfortable, with, but they like to keep their school district, which takes care of, definitely the elementary schools and maybe middle school, and have that operate. So we got 3 districts in Addison County, 3 districts, a unified, integrated, comprehensive high school district, and then a shared services over the whole thing. That whether that works, I'm just answering, we have been thinking about that. Whether that makes any sense whatsoever in other parts of the state, I have no. Some people are thinking about, because I don't think they really are comfortable. They don't know how the AOE idea of a single state CTE is going to work. The more people I talk to people, the more that's not going to work. So anyway, figure that out.
And I appreciate that. I would say we don't want to fall off the other end of the law of having 17 different governance methods either. So.
Something that also is coming to mind is from testimony from last year was the concern that some districts have had where they've combined CTE within the district, and the CTE funds kind of can get rated or can get used for other purposes. So I just flag that as kind of one of the underlying fears that doesn't always get expressed as much, is how CTE's funding, because their funding structure kind of demands a little bit more given their equipment needs and the level of speciality that they have, making sure that they're still able to keep those funds and are able to do the programming they want to do.
I have a few thoughts. One of them is, I almost want a workflow chart, right? This is the problem that we're trying to solve. This is what's in the works right now to solve that problem. This is what's been tried to solve that problem. This is the progress that's been made to solve that problem. And just to talk about CTE in those different buckets, a couple of times around the room today, earlier and now, we've talked about the fact that schedules don't align and graduation requirements don't align. But in theory, I think it's starting next school year, or maybe it's the following school year. Those will be aligned, right? So are we going to solve a problem before the fix that we put in place is set up? Are we going to keep trying to solve that same problem, right? Or are we going to let that go for a year or two, which is 4 years from now, which feels like we're banging our heads on the desk? But do we let it run and see if that actually solves the problem? Or do we keep trying to tinker before we know it's right? And so, when we say, what do we do? I think we have to do knowing what is already in the works, right? Because education doesn't turn on a dime. It's not one of these things and really none of government does. Yeah. So I just don't want us to lose that piece, right? There are things that have been put in place last year and the year before, in theory, are going to solve some of these problems. And then the funding, I think there isn't a perfect solution, but right now we know what the problems are, right? Right now we know that the kids in Rutland aren't getting the services, even though there are spaces available in Addison, because it's too expensive to send them to Addison. And it's easy to just not provide transportation because it's so expensive. So is there you can't charge more, right? Like, and this is just throwing an idea out there. You can't charge more than the local cost, even if a different program is more expensive. Is that something that we can put in place? And that will protect those schools and give kids, right? So I'm trying to look at like, what's what's that solution that hasn't been put on the table yet? Because it's probably cheaper to provide transportation, but not spend that extra $12,000 or whatever it is per student in addition to what they would pay locally. And then the kid gets their needs met. And so I want to be open to those ideas. Something we talked about at some point, I don't even remember when, is what's happening after hours, and are the buildings being used for adults at that point? And could that defray some cost if there's more money coming in from these other programs? I don't know who's going to fund that. Separate issue, but it could defray some costs if there's more money coming in. And so, just like, I always want us to be thinking about those things. And I keep going back to, we have reports on CTE from 2000 in our CTE file from 2015 up to today. And they're all telling us the same problems that we're trying to solve. I think that some of the reports, a lot of the reports aren't updated based on the changes that we've made in the meantime, right? And so I think we have to be really aware of that too. When we, look back at like the APA report, there are things that have been changed since even then. And if we're only relying on that to say, this is what we have to do to go forward, I think we're missing things. And we have like flexible pathways that haven't been fully implemented yet, even though it's 10 years old. And how do we, right? So, and I don't think there have been any fixes to that. So like, maybe that's that flow chart that we need, right? Like, these are the pieces. This has been untouched, this has been touched, and maybe that's our project. And how do we, how do we help the things that have been thought of as good ideas or have been put forward as good ideas and made it through a legislature in the past, get the traction and support that they need to get paid?
Good point. Maybe we need to look at what's in place now that's not being
Fully implemented and
implemented, and the reasons why it's not implemented, along with. I like the idea of one governance structure for all the CTEs. I don't know that the ESA is the right one without knowing what our maps are gonna look like.
Right.
I'm just afraid that we start going down the road of creating this huge bureaucracy that it's gonna be hard to undo. And it becomes more costly than it is effective.
Yeah, just to piggyback a little on what both of you said, I feel like we have quite a bit of consensus about the long-term vision. Right? And we also have quite a bit of consensus about the problems right now. And to Edie's point, I think it's hard to visualize, and I think like literally visualizing it with like flow charts and stuff is a great idea, because to understand the timeline, right, all the components of Act 73 and the timeline of those pieces, and then, right, all these other pieces of programs and legislation that either are being implemented or are part, whatever it is, and really. But anyway, I really like that approach of saying, what can we do right now to solve some of these problems? Understanding that we can't in the next month, we're not gonna be able to create a comprehensive system for CTEs that will get us where we want to be in 20 years, right? But we can make some incremental progress to solving some of the problems we see in front of us.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if Trying to grab the low hanging fruit right now that we can make that will be effective.
Yeah.
Right? And trying to better understand inflexible pathways. Really having, but what comes along is that further exacerbate the problem. There's the center of the drug. That even exacerbate that. I think those are some of the things that we need to understand, and it is that how do we divert students to other CTE centers? Is that feasible, number one, and is it good for the student? Depending on how long they have to be traveling, and then how do we deal with their other core subjects as well? So I think there's a whole lot of stuff that needs to be thought out, really thought out well before we really start coming up with a structure, a governance structure.
Any government.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, in theory, right, the money is gonna be fixed when we have a foundation formula. Do we tinker with it between now and then?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
right,
question,
yeah, yeah.
right?
No, it's.
Like, I don't
Very good question.
have enough information to know what a foundation formula is gonna do to schools or CTEs.
I also don't feel like I have a sense of what the vision is for K-12. I mean, we know that we're a part of that vision, but what else is the vision and how are we differentiating what we're teaching in K-12 versus what we're teaching in tech? If we acknowledge that technical education is not just learning the technical aspects of it, but there is like a lot of other pieces of education attached to it. And I think that this big sense of separation, like these are just two fundamentally different things, isn't helping.
Well, then to get to your point of, like a pre-tech,
Mhm.
then we have schools with spaces that are not being utilized. And how do we, is it, would those spaces fall under the ESA?
Right.
And then, or does it make more sense where those spaces would fall under the control of your regional tech center now to provide that to students before they get into the, 11 and 12? I don't know, but it sure makes a lot of sense to me that we have satellites out there as we're moving from, if we're going to create a bridge, you create the bridge that gets us to regional comprehensive integrated high school. You need to get there.
Yeah.
And I don't know that having the ESA model, unless you're having ESA and then your regions are smaller ESA models under the ESA and they're controlling what's going on with then there's the directors and again, I just see it. It's expanding out and which is not what we want to see. And I'm sure that's not thought, but I can see that happen. And of course, AOE is just the educational umbrella over everybody. So the ESA would be a statewide supervisor unit, basically.
But if we have all the employees. Right, they wanna hold all the employees, so not exactly.
Not exactly, but yeah,
And this is the part that where it gets
Different stuff.
complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, I mean, I'm sure there are teachers, I remember my own experience. Those teachers they did multiple classes. What if have a teacher that teaches like a math class and they're teaching an AutoCAD class under the CTE? Well, how do you split up the payment on that?
And should that actually be separated?
Exactly.
At a certain level, I've felt through this whole process that if what we're talking about is integrated schools, then why are we even having this conversation? It's two parallel tracks.
Exactly.
but I think you need that parallel track because it's gonna take a long time before we
Yeah, so
fully shift over to regional high school here.
So, but so then, to me, that says that what we need to be doing is like you said, building the bridges and, and fixing things can be fixed so that when whatever the unified system pops in, then we can fit into that, whereas the ESA seems like a parallel organization.
And does it make sense that we upend the governance structures that all the CP, the different CP centers have?
Twice.
Right.
Once now and then once again for whatever that
Right.
final.
Yeah.
Yes.
How would that?
Well, should we, I mean, I think we need to think, should we be upending there's three different governance structures now,
Yeah.
or four?
That's
So should we be upending those?
okay.
Because I mean, 12 of the 17 is one structure, then there's three others reps, right?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
So should we be upending that, or can we create a bridge that encompasses all of those structures? Get us to the point where we want, you know, the regional comprehensive integrated system.
I feel like that's a valid question.
It's something we should be talking about,
Yeah.
even
Right.
if it's
What is the bridge we built?
Yeah.
What is the,
right. But I think those are questions that we don't have the time to answer during the
Yeah.
short period of time in the session. I think that's something that a working group can, you know, continue to talk about.
Right.
You know, we have APA's report, and I mean, we can utilize those reports, but maybe, I mean, is that right for Vermont? I don't.
Well, there was some resistance to the idea of doing a study group, at least from AOE's position.
Yeah, well, but it really wouldn't be a study. It's not a study, because we're not studying.
It's not
it.
studying.
It's been studied all those groups, like, how do we, it's a working group
Yeah.
to, well, let's work out these questions that we're having. And answer them. And move forward where everybody's on board. Let's move forward with this idea. But I think there's still questions that have to be answered on the rest of the restructuring of education, or
So I like that idea, and it goes into sort of the flow chart kind of thing. Because, we've identified a lot of problems, they've been pretty consistent over the years. And some of them, you really might need a work group to sort out the details. There might be some that we could do this year though.
well, there is, I mean, there's some things,
So maybe, but the flow
maybe
chart,
there are other things that we can do before the end of the session that we can pass in a bill.
but that's where the flow chart idea, I think, comes in to me anyway. Okay, line them up and figure out, we've been talking about, we know it's just, and line them up. And what do we think we can bite off this session? And what do we want to get a work group together to iron out the details?
Okay. We'll see if we get answers from AOE on the questions that we had last week. And I think that'll help us better understand AOE's thinking. Are there anything we can incorporate?
Yeah.
Can prompt them to, maybe prompt them to provide the non-14 slide thing that's in our testimony, but the more full, I think our webpage still has that, the one that Zoe showed us that was much more condensed than the more expanded one.
The one that they brought last week?
Yeah. I mean,
Along with that,
More detail,
uh,
but we need even more.
we need more than that, really.
it's really hard to figure out some of this stuff without knowing what the money is about. And, you got this JFO and APA, right?
Yeah.
And then talking, it's really hard to figure out some of this without knowing what they envision as a per pupil amount. In my mind.
Well, yeah, because it has to incorporate the cost, the administrative cost of CTE as well. It's not just student costs.
Right. True, yeah, you could break it up that way. But it'd be nice to,
You
come
got,
on, give us,
you gotta pay for the.
show us the numbers.
You gotta pay for the ESA.
Even if we not thrilled about the ESA though, still think that analysis, I think was focused on under foundation formula, what would be your weighted CTE.
Mhm.
So, even that would be very helpful.
Yeah. Okay.
Also on the funding thing, something that keeps coming up for me is how much of a sort of entity that has fundraising capacity for things like large pieces of equipment that can go and liaison with some of our manufacturers and work out some deals so that we can actually get them the equipment needs that they have.
And yeah, I mean, when you look at, I'm trying to remember, what's the, yeah. I mean, they've worked at the tech center to actually bring students in as interns.
Right.
Um, But how do we, I mean, I think that's not a bad idea, is if you can work with companies within the tech area that could provide some training equipment that can not only help CTE students in the up to grade 12, but also the adult side
Absolutely. And it'll help,
training.
hopefully in theory.
Gotta remember that multi-million-dollar equipment too. A lot.
But it's in their best interest because they're, I mean, they're coming to us screaming because they don't have enough people. And this gives them an opportunity to train their own workers.
And if we give it donor
Well,
capacity, they can write it off.
Is that fall under flexible pathways? Nope.
I guess I think about it in the system, right? Like, it's not our job to match up the employer with the CTE, but it's our job to make sure the system supports this happening and encourages it happening statewide. Not just in the place where somebody has the capacity to make that relationship. And so that would be my, like, how do we create the system that allows for this to happen as easily as possible?
Oh, it would have to be something that is housed in whatever governance structure. I kind of imagine it being similar to a PTA, like a very well-funded PTA. Having the ability to actually raise the funds. And they've already, well, AOE has already talked about the, boards of, and the cooperation that they have with industry. So it's being able to actually expand that further. And get that kind of regional variety with our manufacturers and the folks that are gonna benefit from this.
Well, a good example is the aviation program in Burlington, right? 'Cause it's run by Burlington, it's in South Burlington by the airport. And that is, really kind of obvious reasons for why that works there. And it has a lot of industry support, and they also have adult CTE programs as well. So it's really good. I mean, it's a good example of something that has been stood up and really successfully.
I'm just trying to replicate that. Mistake.
And then the question is like, what is the industry that it could support, right? But it might not be, unless there's a vibrant airport, it's probably not aviation, but the other part, Coventry could have a,
You said it a little louder.
oh, just, we were just talking about how do you then stand up programs like that that are appropriate regionally in more rural parts of the state as well, which is.
But, I mean, another question to that is, are they able to get enough students to fulfill the workforce that they need in Burlington area, in that industry? And if the answer is no,
Right.
then how can we replicate that in other areas of the state that can then train those students when they graduate, they can
Yeah.
come down, they can go to Burlington.
Yeah.
And we need housing.
Yeah.
Right?
Locking in,
Everything's tied together.
locking in that secondary place to having a glut of training when they reach the quota, and now what can they pivot to?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, they had the same issue in Quebec too. Years ago, did the same thing that we've done, is their students to tech, right? And so through the schools, they're teaching tech. Then all of a sudden, they didn't have people to build houses and build construction and all of the stuff that we're doing. We're trying to get that. I mean, that's one thing we're good at, is we find a niche that needs to be filled and we move everybody to it.
Right.
We forget about all the other stuff until it's too late. Because, I mean, remember that CTE is not just about the trades, it's tech, it's nursing, it's a whole bunch of stuff that we have to be careful.
The health sciences.
Yeah.
Piece is really important.
I think this is helpful for us. Better understand where we're all thinking, how we move forward. I think, we really need that flow chart for better understanding. I think we really need to go after the low hanging fruit right now.
Agreed.
And I don't know if it is possible, but it would be real if we can request that we get just some kind of sense of what they're thinking about for the rest of the K-12 system. Because I think that's gonna really depend, create barriers on what we're able to get accomplished too.
Do you mean different from Act 73?
I guess no, I don't think I mean different from Act 73. I just mean like, what are they imagining? Imagining that like structure to happen, because I guess I have a very hard time viewing these as two separate systems, but I see that there's a process that views them as separate systems. So what are they seeing?
Yeah.
And
But-
where do
but-
they imagine CT from their side?
Who's the they?
The Education Committee in the House and the Education Committee in the Senate, and also the Agency of Education.
3 different visions.
At least, at least. I mean, no, really, like
Or
that's
just the
their,
philosophy. I just need to understand what the philosophy is or something.
well, so you're right on that there is not one direction right now, right? Yeah, and so that's why we're talking about what is the low hanging fruit
Right.
that we can make an impact? Is there, maybe what is there some way that we can make an impact
Mhm.
while the rest of that is being
Yeah, absolutely.
figured out? Because you're exactly right. We can't do this alone, and we shouldn't do this alone as an independent thing. This is part of a bigger system.
And in all honesty, we're dependent on that system to really
Yeah.
properly legislate this part.
Exactly. And we don't want to start taking low hanging fruit and turn out that that fruit isn't particularly right. To extend the metaphor.
I think what VACTED has brought to us is the low hanging fruit. Right now.
Yeah.
Agreed.
the
And
changes.
and that would make huge change for them, how they operate. It doesn't get us where we want to be, but it sure helps get us down the road.
So it would be real helpful for me if someone could start putting together that list.
I thought you were gonna do it.
I have, but
But I think too, what Eden said is that should really look at what we already have in law. And
Right.
how is it being utilized or not utilized? And along with rule changes and rule upgrades and things like that. So maybe that's, I think, a project for our interns to take a look at what we already have in law that's really not big. Personal learning plans, flexible pathways. Okay. So this, I think, will help get us some direction. We'll keep pushing on AOE to get us answers to our questions. And we'll keep talking with the CTEs and whoever else you think we should be talking to. In order to get us to a place where we can attach language to S313 and get us over here. All right. Anything else? Anybody want any more input? All right. I think that gets us to the end of the day. Sure, we may have an amendment to 385, we don't know yet. And we'll talk about S173 tomorrow, vocational rehabilitation. Start taking testimony on that. We just got it in the Senate today.
Which bill is it?
S173. Way over to the
Our
right.
newest,
Oh, there.
our newest bill.
Yes.
I'm just about Senate bills with Senate.
Yeah.
Could have been sit. Okay, good. So I think we're done for the day. How hard you work last Saturday?
You gonna bank it?
No, this will be.
No.
I hate getting fully in them.
You're getting soft.
Getting soft.
You know what happens when you're gonna leave.